Hey, how you doing? It's Chris Slingham, Impact Performance and Fitness. Today I wanted to discuss functional strength a little bit with you. One of the biggest things we do in our gym is make sure that when we train people that we start them off with the basics. A lot of people, don't really like the basics. The basics are boring. They make you sometimes feel like you're not fitting in with the rest of the group if you're working out in a group setting or with other people. But I promise you the results do come a lot better when you actually pay attention to some of the basics. What I mean by that is, for instance, you may go to a class, you may have gone to a training facility, and right away you started training with a kettlebell. They threw a kettlebell in your hand and told you to do a goblet squat. Now, when you did this goblet squat, you didn't break the 90-degree point. You didn't sometimes even approach near close to 90 degrees. So that means your butt being even with your knees. So one of the things that we teach is we stress getting below 90 degrees. Sometimes even close to a 45-degree angle, a full squat is what we call it. Now, a lot of people say that there's more stress, more tension on your knees at that point, but there's actual studies that show that there's more stress, more tension on your knees at a 90 degrees. So that's why one of the reasons why we go below 90, going down to 45. The other is once you get below that 90-degree point, we're now turning it into a hamstring curl in order to fire back up. Anytime, box squats. A box squat is a hamstring curl in its own right. So when we squat down below our 90-degree point, more to that 45-degree angle, and then go back up, we're accomplishing two things. We're firing our hamstrings, we're also firing our glutes, especially with women. So one of the things that women suffer from is a higher risk of ACL or meniscal issues with the knee. A lot of this has to do with the way their hips are aligned. They call it a Q angle with the hips. Also, they suffer from knock knees. Now, this also comes from the way that their angle and their hips are. So this makes sure that we can go over some of the basics in squatting, making sure they're pushing their knees out slightly, making sure they're dropping down below 90 degrees to that 45-degree point, activating the glutes, activating the hamstrings, because in order to prevent injury prevent injury of the knee, you have to properly train the glutes and the hamstrings. So also what this also does is it's going to help with flexibility and mobility issues. A lot of people sometimes might not be able to get below the 90-degree point because of hip mobility issues, or sometimes the neuromuscular tension to get down that far and go back up isn't developed. Now you see this a lot at a younger age. We would take a younger athlete and have them master body weight. Well, what happens is when you become an adult and you engage in training and you've never really been physically active or have trained with proper technique, that sometimes we have to reboot that system. So that's why we'll come in and we'll do a TRX squat to a beginner to get them just feel in the right form. Then we progress them to a traditional body weight squat. We'll take a medicine ball, one of our bigger ones, or a bench or a box, and we'll put it underneath them so that they actually have to go down and touch the bench or the ball. That way it gives them that register that, hey, we're at the right point, we're at that right angle that we want to be at. After they've mastered being able to keep trunk stability through that whole exercise, being able to go below 90 degrees to that 45-degree angle point, that's when we start talking about loading. And we should, you don't have to go right away and throw a bar in somebody's hand or even 50-pound dumbbells and say, hey, squat this. 10 pounds to a beginner is plenty enough. I think sometimes trainers, we want to give our clients the feeling that they've accomplished a whole bunch, but hey, sometimes goblet squatting 10 pounds is a lot if you consider where you came from. So these changes don't take a lot of time to make most of the time. For some people it does. I, for instance, have a 15-year-old client, male, came in. We had a lot of issues as far as being able to have him squat at the right angle, keeping trunk stability. He had a lot of trunk flexion at the bottom of his squat. So we went through a series of different progressions. We had him squatting with the TRX. That taught him a little bit. He was able to rely less on the TRX and gain more balance. After we did that, we then put the plates underneath the back of his heels while he did goblet squats while we loaded him. We did want to start building some muscle a little bit quicker, but necessarily, you don't want to do that with everybody. It was particularly for him, for sport specific and building power development for him. But we got him squatting on plates underneath of his feet, helped him with his form. Now to this day, we got him goblet squatting double kettlebells at a heavier load. So he's able to maintain trunk stability, He's not having that trunk flexion anymore. He's not having that balance, and he's keeping his knee joints and his ligaments safe by squatting down underneath that 45-degree angle without coming out over his toes. So it's very important to go through the progressions in exercise, not just to jump into anything and think that you're automatically going to be able to be the best squatter in the world on your first or second session. That sometimes it may take a couple months. For instance, front squat is a little lower level than a back squat to a point, but a lot of people have issues with front squats with the barbell, considering they have poor wrist flexibility, poor tricep flexibility, or poor back flexibility. So we actually utilize that, to help people with their mobility and their movement, because that's one of the biggest things that we try to accomplish here is improving the quality of life through mobility and flexibility. So a lot of my clients aren't even on back squats yet, and we save that for a lot of our athletes, but eventually our clients will get to that point, and that way they can actually produce more force and build more muscle. So that's kind of how we progress and regress. Stay tuned. We'll talk about how to start off with push-ups for people, make sure they can execute a fine push-up and not have any troubles with that. So back to the basics, stick with what's easy, use assistance. I guarantee you're going to see way better results if you take it slow, build muscle properly, don't have any imbalances, any muscular imbalances causing any injuries, that you're keeping your ligaments safe. It's just smart training, and if your trainer is having you lift a whole bunch of weight and your knees are killing you, chances are it's because you have poor mobility issues. Chances are you haven't built the movement pattern for that squat, or you're not squatting deep enough without enough with less weight. So go back to less weight, start squatting deep, learn how to keep your trunk stable, shoulders high. I promise you that you'll stay free from injury, and you'll get way more results doing it that way and taking your time. So that was exercise progressions. I hope you enjoyed it. Remember, train harder, train often, and let's live the life you deserve.